The E100, a 100-ton experimental chassis developed by the firm of Adler using the Krupp 130-ton Tiger Mouse design, was never finished. Partially complete at the end of the war, it was recovered to the United Kingdom for testing and evaluation, and the tank part of its history has remained centered on this aspect of it. The design was a complicated and drawn-out process, and the use of the hull went further than just a tank concept. Welcome to a new Tank Encyclopedia voiced article by Andrew Hills on the 15/17 cm Sturmgeschütz auf E100 Fahrgestell. As always, we would like to thank our patrons for the support that makes this possible. When Krupp's Tiger Mouse was abandoned in January of 1943, the design was surplus as development effort went to Porsche's Mouse instead. However, Ernst Kniekampf of the Panzer Commission did not throw out Krupp's design. Instead, and regardless of whatever reservations he may have expressed later about heavy tanks, he handed off the plans to the firm of Adler by the end of June 1943. Adler then worked on the design, making changes to it, but keeping the essential design the same. The only substantive change, in fact, was the switch from Tiger II-style torsion bar suspension to externally mounted Belleville washer-type spring suspension. Very little other than collecting parts took place with the E100 until March of 1944, when Krupp became aware of its existence. Considering it was their original work, they were likely unhappy at having been sidelined on the matter, but they obligingly provided assistance to Adler in the construction of the E100 anyway. When in May 1944, the opportunity to work on a new vehicle mounting a 15 cm or 17 cm gun came up, there were two hulls optioned for it. The Mouse, designed by Porsche and built by Krupp, and the E100, designed by Krupp, added to by Adler, and built by Krupp. Krupp therefore embarked on another task: how to fit the huge 15 cm or 17 cm gun onto their as yet unbuilt and untested E100 chassis. Conception. If the idea of a 15 cm or 17 cm gun in a fixed casemate on a Mouse hull is hard enough to visualize, then it is worth bearing in mind that mounting a gun of the same size on an E100 chassis is even more so. Specifically because the E100 chassis was so much lighter, under 90 tons when fully laden. These ideas were considered at a meeting held at Porsche's plant on the 17th of May of 1944. And it was here that Krupp expressed their earnest desire to do anything to avoid having to try to use the 15 cm gun in preference to the 17 cm one, likely as a result of the size and weight of the gun and its shells. Obering Hendel, the officer dispatched to ensure production quotas were being met by tank factories, considered both Mouse and E100 ideas. His conclusion was not in favor of the Mouse. The Mouse hull was far too high for a new fixed casemate to still fit within the rail loading gauge of a normal railcar, whereas the E100 hull, being significantly lower, was much more suitable. The Mouse plan was over. It was not a suitable platform and was abandoned as an idea. Instead, the E100 was selected, and on May 28th of 1944, Krupp was requested to produce a 1:5 scale wooden model of their design. The purpose of this model was to get a better insight of how the vehicle could be organized internally for the crew and ammunition. Importantly, both the 15 cm and 17 cm guns were to be shown, and the design was known as the 15/17 cm Kanone auf E100 Fahrgestell, meaning 15 or 17 cm gun on 100-ton experimental chassis. Development to termination. Although the E100 chassis had shown more promise primarily as a result of being lower and lighter than the alternative Mouse chassis, this success was short-lived. Just under 2 months after being told to produce the model, all work was stopped. Waffenprüfung 6, the design office responsible for motorized equipment, forwarded to Krupp a letter from Reichsminister Albert Speer, dated 10th of July, 1944. In the letter, Speer, on Hitler's orders, required all work on heavy guns on tank chassis to cease. There was a model, however. Krupp must have finished or at least prepared a model by this date, as the letter ended that they were to take the model of the Sturmgeschütz 15 cm L68 to General Guderian. Guderian was not a fan of these heavy tank projects and had scuppered plans for a Mouse production a year earlier. There was little to no likelihood that he would suddenly change his mind on this type of project, seeing just a wooden model of it. Nothing more is heard of this project after this point, as it met the same fate as the 15/17 cm Sturmgeschütz auf Mausfahrzeug before it. Plans for mounting the 15 cm gun still survive, at least for mounting it to the front of the E100's turret, but there is no trace of the 1:5 scale wooden model. Nonetheless, it is worthwhile considering what this machine might have looked like, aside from the fantasy creations of model makers and computer game companies, which are designed more for their cool factor than their basis in engineering. Layout. The primary consideration over what a 15/17 cm Canone Alf E100 Fahrgestell would look like begins with a look at the E100 hull. As it was, the E100 hull featured a conventional layout with the engine at the rear, transmission at the front, and a centrally mounted turret. There were plans for a modified layout on the E100, but as of 1944, when these plans were being considered, these had not progressed, and the original E100 hull had still not been finished. It remains open to question as to whether or not the 15/17 cm Canone Alf E100 Fahrgestell being proposed was to use the first hull or this later modified hull, but as this was future planning, it is possible it was based off the second hull. Further, it remains open to question as to whether the layout would be fundamentally altered with a casemate placed at the rear with the engine at the front, like the Ferdinand and Elephant, or if it would simply occupy the space previously filled by the turret and basket. Regardless of which E100 hull was to be used, the turret, and therefore the casemate, could only be fitted centrally or just forward of center. Mounting anything else on the already heavy front end, such as in the manner of a Jagd Panther, would simply overwhelm the suspension. Assuming a central position for the casemate in roughly the same manner as the Jagd Tiger would mean that no changes would be made to the engine and transmission layout in either hull, and keep the front driving position, the front left, able to access the main crew compartment. Moving to a rear casemate system would separate the driver from the fighting compartment. A rear casemate would also suffer from the additional problem of having the gun over the engine bay, which would greatly complicate access to the engine compartment for maintenance, a serious consideration in the design of the Jagd Tiger and a primary reason for adopting a central casemate system. Gun. The two guns in consideration for mounting on the E100 chassis were the 17 cm Sturmpanzerkanone L53 and the 15 cm Sturmpanzerkanone L68. The 17 cm gun was, as of the 22nd of March 1944, still only a paper design and was unlikely to be available anytime soon, given the demand for gun production already being very high. The second gun, and by far the preferred option of the two, was the 15 cm Sturmpanzerkanone L68 gun, and the design for this piece was finished on the 4th of July, 1944, just 6 days before Hitler killed the project. Given the enormous size of the 17 cm gun, its huge breech, high weight, and the size of its ammunition, coupled with the date of the design for the 15 cm gun, it seems likely that Krupp did everything they could to avoid using the 17 cm gun. Both guns, however, had to meet the requirements set by General Guderian in April of 1944 to be able to defeat up to 200 mm of armor at 4,000 meters, leaving no doubt as to the key intended purpose of the vehicle: the destruction of increasingly well-armored enemy tanks at long range. Of note, too, is that there is no comment as to the secondary weapon, not a machine gun, but a second tank cannon, like was originally intended for the Moisen program, with a 15 cm or 12.8 cm gun paired with a 7.5 cm gun. Only using this single large gun would free up significant space inside the casemate for the E100-based vehicle, as well as providing additional stowage space for the 15 cm ammunition. Just as with the Maus and E100, it could be expected that a machine gun, either an MG34 or MG42, would be mounted independently on the left-hand side of the main gun to be operated by the gunner. One last note on the casemate is the use of a rangefinder. The two rangefinders considered for the Maus 2 and E100 turrets were coincidence-type devices fitted across the width of the turret. Both types were around 2 meters long, and there seems to be little doubt that the 15/17 cm Canone Alf E100 Fahrgestell would also have a rangefinder, especially given the 4,000 meter ranges at which it was going to be expected to deliver accurate fire. Given the common positioning of the rangefinder on the Maus 2 and E100, it is reasonable to assume a similar arrangement of a similar size and type of rangefinder would also have been used on the 15/17 cm Canone Alf E100 Fahrgestell. Crew. Regardless of which layout the 15/17 cm Canone Alf E100 Fahrgestell took, it would need a crew, and it is hard to envisage the vehicle operating with a crew of fewer than 6. At minimum, the vehicle would need a driver, a radio operator, a loader, a gunner, and a commander, which totals 5. The Maus required a 6th man in order to operate the secondary 7.5 cm gun, and while it was likely that no such gun would be on the 15/17 cm Canone Alf E100 Fahrgestell, the use of a secondary loader is all but essential, unless some kind of loader assist system was planned. A one-piece 15 cm shell, for example, weighed in excess of 34 kilograms and could weigh even more than 40 kilograms depending on the ammunition one might have chosen. Moving those shells around would have rapidly exhausted a single loader, so a second loader is almost essential just to make the machine viable. Conclusion. Although the idea of the 15cm or 17cm gun using the mouse chassis had failed after a brief spark of interest in May of 1944, with the E100 being selected in preference, it was not much of a loss. The E100 was to suffer the same fate. On the 10th of July of 1944, Hitler cancelled all the work on these heavy guns on heavy tanks, and the 15/17cm Kanone auf E100 Fahrgestell became yet another failed project in what was a very long list of such projects. Although it is not known what the 15/17cm Kanone auf E100 Fahrgestell would have looked like, and much of this article has been speculative about the shape and look of the vehicle, it is important to consider the design in order to gain an understanding of the challenges involved in mounting a very large gun on a very large chassis. For Germany in mid-1944 to be considering these weapons, though, was pure folly. It would take months to get such a machine into production, and longer still to get crews trained and units issued and deployed to combat. At a time when Germany was on the retreat and the war was a foregone conclusion, to focus precious and ever-dwindling resources on these machines was wasteful. It did nothing more than hasten Germany's defeat. That is all for this article. If you would like to help us continue expanding our website, please consider subscribing and donating through Patreon or PayPal. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Reddit, and our community Discord server. Lastly, please visit our website, where we will be publishing new articles on the regular. Until next time, keep us in your sights.